Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do.
In this episode, I interview Scheree Gilchrist, Megan Hennings, and Helen Headrick, the innovative team at Legal Aid of North Carolina, whose collaborative approach to building trust through radical transparency is showing how AI can truly democratize access to justice for those who need it most.
Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I'm thrilled today to have the team from Legal Aid of North Carolina on. The access to justice gap is huge in the United States. It is an ongoing problem that needs solving. And the team at Legal Aid of North Carolina knows just how to go about solving that problem. And I'm really proud that I've been able to work with them for a few years now on exactly that. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Scheree Gilchrist, Megan Hennings, and Helen Headrick. Let's start with you, Scheree. How are you doing today? And if you could share with us a little bit about your role at Lance.
Hi again, Tom. As Tom said, my name is Scheree Gilchrist, and I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Legal Aid of North Carolina. I'm also the Director of our Innovation Lab. I work basically at the cross-section of access to justice and emerging technology, as well as service delivery, and I'm helping legal aid or program evolve responsibly while keeping people and equity at the center of everything we do. Equity for us means ensuring that all the communities that we serve have equal access to justice and using technology and other non-tech solutions to make that a reality.
Fantastic. How about you, Megan?
Thanks, Tom, and thanks so much for having us on. Thank you to everyone listening as well. My name is Megan Hennings. I am the Program Manager and Staff Attorney for the Innovation Lab here at Legal Aid of North Carolina. I do lots of different fun things, but basically doing the on-the-ground work for our lab. So all the way from, creating ideas, problem solving with our teams, mapping out what the needs are, all the way through deploying new tools and helping some with the building as well. And I get to work with Helen and her team on the comms and community engagement around all the stuff that we're working on. So it's a really multifaceted approach.
And you, Helen?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Headrick. I am Legal Aid of North Carolina's Chief Communications Officer. Similar to Megan, I do a wide array of things. I manage our website, internal and external communications, social media relations, all that sort of stuff. But part of the biggest thing I do and why I'm here today is I get to collaborate with the Innovation Lab on their projects, getting the word out, helping if it has anything to do with like language or accessibility, I help with that. So yeah, I'm excited to dive in today. And thank you for having us, Tom.
I'm really happy to have you all on because audience, really, did you hear that? I mean, they got so much going on each individually that they have to juggle. And it really does take a community of people to solve this problem. And it is something that has been worked on for years and years. And so what I'm talking about is the access to justice gap, the access to justice problem in the United States. And I think we should start with that first, because it kind of frames what the stakes are, what the challenge is, and really what all of us are trying to do to improve that for the people that need it most. And so, Scheree, if you don't mind sharing, what is this access to justice gap?
The way I think about it, the justice gap is really not just about the law. It's about access, information, and trust, right? I mean, we can certainly point to the numbers. LSE puts out a justice gap report, and it tells you that 92% of low-income families that are trying to address civil legal needs, those needs go unmet through the justice system. But when you break that down, it really is about, like I said, access, information, and trust, because what the numbers show is that people are left out of the system. They don't have access to the courts. They don't have the information they need to arm themselves. They're not empowered, and they don't trust the institutions to provide for their legal needs as well. We see that in the work that we do here at Legal Aid of North Carolina. We get lumped into the system is failing. And, there's a lot of mistrust when clients come to us. And at the heart of it, as I've said, it starts with how can we make it easy for people to understand what their rights are, to understand what the next steps are, then to also get in contact with an attorney if that's the route they need to go, or to empower them to act on their behalf if they don't need to go to the courts. And then once they've gotten past that hurdle, then how do we help them navigate the court system and the other institutions that need to provide them with the services and address their needs for them?
Let me ask you a follow-up question, because I think for a lot of people, especially those that might not be familiar with the access to justice gap, it seems a little abstract. It seems a little like, because it hasn't affected them personally, their numbers, why isn't this being taken care of by the government? I think what would really bring it home, and I'd love if you could share something like this, is one story. Like, what is the story of how an individual is concretely impacted by this gap?
So think about a parent, two kids, who is now facing an eviction, and they get a notice from their landlord that they have to go to court. Well, what does that tell that person? Most people don't understand what their legal rights are. They don't understand when they have a legal right. So they look at that notice, and in their minds, they read it. It says you have to vacate. To them, they don't know that that doesn't necessarily mean you're being evicted. So maybe they take action on their own and they vacate, and that results in homelessness because they don't understand what their rights are. Or maybe they take action and they try to find an attorney. They don't know where to turn, but they get in contact with an attorney who tells them it's going to cost $500 an hour, $350 an hour for you to get help. Well, what does that person do when they can't afford to pay an attorney $300, $400, $500 an hour to resolve that matter for them? They start looking for other options, and they go down a rabbit hole of try to find the other options. Maybe they get referred to a legal aid service because legal aid programs historically have been the ones that help people bridge that gap. And that gap that we're talking about is the person who is confronted with a legal need, who has to take action, but does not have the means to get into the court system to resolve that action. So they're effectively left out. So who fills that gap is often left up to a legal aid program that provides free legal services. But we have our own challenges as a legal aid program. We get many requests for help. So many people who are in that very similar situation where they're faced with a legal matter that they don't quite understand, they can't afford an attorney, and they're coming to us. And we can't help every single person that contacts us with a legal need. I'll tell you, for example, that here in North Carolina, there are over 2 million people who are eligible for the services that we provide. And with 2 million people eligible, even a program as big as ours, we are unable to meet that need. We provide I think we close about 25,000 cases per year. So that should tell you that even within that context, that gap is pretty significant.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge gap. And I get it. It's not just I can't afford to pay a lawyer, but it's also like that there's socio and economic, even educational gaps in terms of how comfortable that person might feel about approaching a legal problem or even knowing it's a legal problem. Right. And
Yes.
so like trying to wrap your head around that while still having to drive the kids to school and get to work. Yeah, it's an inordinate burden that we're asking people to shoulder. You mentioned a little bit about your organization, and just so everyone who's not familiar with it, if you could just share with us a little bit about what is Legal Aid of North Carolina and what does it do and what's its mission?
Legal Aid of North Carolina is a statewide legal services program. We serve all 100 counties in North Carolina. We have 23 offices that are spread across the state. And from those offices, we serve about 5 or 6 surrounding counties each. We close, like I said before, about 25,000 cases annually, and we prefer to say that we offer holistic services in some of the basic needs that people might have. So, housing, interpersonal violence, family, public benefits, consumer, employment, those sorts of issues are what we're addressing. And in terms of our mission or commitment, I think, is that every person deserves a fair chance. I think that's what we believe. We firmly believe that every person deserves a fair chance at justice, and that the ability to pay or not pay should not be the barrier that prevents somebody from getting the help that they need to address whatever legal issue they're confronted with. And you're absolutely right, Tom, that there is this, we work at the intersection of human, social, and economic needs a lot. And it is for that reason that we tend to look at our clients holistically, because when they come to us, they come as a whole person with all of those needs. And the fact that they don't understand that they have a legal issue, they often present their matter in sort of this non-legal way. They give a story. This is what's happening to me. This is what's going on in my life. Can you help me? It starts from a place of, can you help me? And it is for us as lawyers and others who work in our program to then break that down into actionable legal claims. But from the person's perspective, they're coming to us with an issue that is really at the intersection of law and social work and all of those things. And we have to be the ones that help them navigate that as well as understand it, and then help them or empower them to help themselves.
Well, I think Lance is doing a fantastic job of that. I get it though. Like it's a difficult place because they can't always explain what they need or what's going on. And so it's very helpful to have an experienced expert to be able to draw that out of them. So that leads me to the next question naturally, which is, what does Lance do different? Like, what is Lance's approach to solving this access to justice problem? If you don't mind sharing some strategies or even tactics, Megan.
I think one of the strategies that we've had that I think sets us apart a little bit from other organizations is the launch of the Innovation Lab in and of itself about 2 years ago. And so Legal Aid of North Carolina has been innovative over the years since its inception of consolidating legal services across North Carolina to try to address this problem. And as technology and legal needs have changed over the decades, it's always been innovative. But the launch of the Innovation Lab was to really have a core team within our organization that combines both the legal knowledge and skills with technology skills, IT services, communications, engagement, like bringing all of the things together to think about how do we, transform our work from intake to the attorney work to our outreach, kind of across the board. And I think that has really helped propel us into doing all that we can do because we have that sort of in-house team to do that. As you can imagine, legal aid staffs, time is not something we have the luxury of. So at times when we're relying on teams that have, lots of cases or multiple other jobs, that can be tough. And so I think that the consolidating of that innovative work within the lab, within our organization, has been such an asset for us to be able to do what we do. But I think it also allows us to be very, like I said, multifaceted with it and thinking about all of the angles. We have so many people that come to us, as Scheree said, both that qualify for our services, but also that are part of that access to justice gap, and that they might be slightly above income for our services, but that doesn't mean that they don't need free information and knowledge of the courts and knowledge of their legal issue. I kind of imagine it as a very large mantle that we're trying to uphold for low income North Carolinians, middle income North Carolinians to be able to access information, and thinking about, of this large amount of folks that we're trying to support, knowing that the model of one attorney to every single one of those people is just, it's not viable. It hasn't ever been, and it's continuing not to be. And so, how do we utilize what we do have, new technologies that are emerging to try to support as many of those people as possible? And sort of thinking from the informational and resource stage all the way down to brief advice and then service in terms of representation in court, or actually having a one-on-one attorney. And how do we build the tools that go all along with that? So I know we'll talk about Leah in a second, but that's one of the key informational tools. But knowing that it's just not just the tools themselves, it's how do we work with our community partners to also uphold that mantle? How do we use the tech? Where does it make sense to use tech? Where does it make sense to harness really the human communication that's there, and where we know people are? I think we talk a lot about how do we meet people where they are, right? Is that in a library? Is that in their local DSS office or at the courthouse? And knowing that we can do outreach and communication there, but that we might not have the individual human support to be in all of those places, but that can get folks in our pipeline, into our services, or to if it's not with us, the place that they need to be as quickly and as easily as possible. And how do we marry the technology with the human touch, our mission, our values and ethics overall, to get us to that place where we can support as many people as possible?
I think it's wonderful. Also, the fact that, the information that Lance offers is available to everyone. It's not a matter of qualifying financially. I think some people, when they think legal aid, they think, oh, well, I have to be able to qualify for that, and that's really low income. But actually, this information is available to everyone. And, whether or not that Lance could actually help them with one-on-one help is also like not necessarily determinative by income. There's some exceptions to that. And, from working with you for a few years, I know that there's some things that, people that have a higher income may qualify for. It really depends. They have to reach out and find out. And just doing like the plain math of it, if it's 25,000 cases that are handled when it's potentially could be up to 2 million, then, the one-to-one of like one attorney for one client, it's just impossible. It's just impossible. And yeah, there has to be a different way. And so to talk a little bit about that different way, Helen, I'd love to talk with you and hear more about our experiment together with Leah, the legal information assistant. How did that come together, and what do you think about it?
Leah, I'm just going to spell her out real quick. Her name is Leah, Lia, Legal Information Assistant. She really came to be, as do many of our projects that we are working on, as a result of direct client feedback. As I mentioned earlier, I am in charge of our website, and I hear all the time, you guys have such a great website, but there's so many resources. If you look at our website, I mean, we cover such a wide array of topics, from domestic violence to disaster relief. We have hundreds and hundreds of resources on our website, and the law is confusing. Like, I am not an attorney, so it's always interesting for me to try to learn these things. And so what we did with Leah is we took every resource on our website, went through it, made sure it was all up to date, everything was accurate, and then we translated it to about a 5th or 6th grade reading level. This is because our clients are just the typical population of North Carolina. The average reading level is about a 5th grade reading level. So that's what we did. We wanted to make sure that it was easily understandable for everyone. So we did that. We worked with Tom to get it going. And I mean, he really brought the vision to life. And Leah has been such a success. In her first year, she had over 50,000 conversations. And the majority of those conversations, as are the majority of our clients, were experiencing domestic violence issues. And I think the important thing about Leah is when people are trying to contact us, they don't always need, like we talked about, an actual attorney. They might just need advice, or they just have a question they need answered. They just are trying to understand what an eviction notice actually means. So instead of waiting on hold on our helpline, they can just go to Leah, ask that question, get the information they need right then, right there.
I remember that one of the things that came up, I think it was a few months into launching Leah, was that there was a disaster in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Helene hit last year, as we all know, in Western North Carolina. And Western North Carolina had never really seen a disaster like that. So we immediately got together and we're like, how do we get information out to these people? Immediately, we're like, oh, we can just upload all of our Helene resources to Leah. And so anyone in the area or all over North Carolina could easily get information about how to apply for FEMA, what to do if their house was damaged, how to work with their insurance company. So all of that, I think within a day after Helene struck, we were able to get uploaded onto the back end of Leah because it was that simple. And then people could get the answers that they needed.
And one thing I love that you all have done with Leah is really giving her a personality.
Yes.
Like Leah has like a little business suit on.
She's our mascot.
Little name tag.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And now,
if I can jump in, Tom, I think one of the things that we learned though through this exercise, because when we launched Leah was sort of the first of its kind, a public facing legal chatbot. And one of the things that we learned was really about RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and refining the resource material that the bot then pulls from. Because what that has taught us is that, as Helen said, taking that information that we have on our websites and just putting it into Leah, that's fine. But we also had to refine all of that to ensure that Leah's outputs are accurate and concise enough for people to respond to and really drill down into how do you make it work for an AI tool? Because some of that was written for human engagement and interaction. And intuitively, when you're working together as humans, you look at that, you already have the context, you already have all that nuanced information that the bot doesn't necessarily have. And so we had to spend some time and refine the resource material to ensure that the output then also has that context, also has that nuance, so that depending on how somebody frames their question, Leah can answer very accurately. And we feel very proud of that work. I know we worked a lot with you as well. We worked with clients and community partners and staff to ensure that all of that was done correctly.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that too, is that, Leah, retrieval augmented generation, the whole technology, it's not magic. It really isn't. It's not that you just throw a bunch of stuff in it and then it just takes it from there and it's perfect. It requires a lot of work. And we all did a lot of work together, and your team in organizing the information, in updating it, in making it reliable, in making it so that it wasn't overlapping and duplicative. Because on web pages, it's kind of an isolated island. So you might state everything all at once in one web page and then restate it in another web page. So it kind of gets a little confusing even for an AI. So there was that. And there was also we had weeks and weeks and weeks and months and ongoing testing that we do to ensure that it's saying things reliably and that you are happy with it and it meets your expectations. So yeah, for everyone watching there is work that you need to put into, but it does pay off because it allows you to have that one-to-many relationship with people as opposed to just the one-to-one.
And I think just to jump in there, I think part of the success and impact of Leah, because it does make information so accessible in, whether it's because she's personalized or how the technology is working on the back end to bring all that information together. But the fact that the information is so accessible and how information really is knowledge is power for our clients and for folks that are facing legal issues. I think it's great for a legal services organization to be a little bit more upriver too. Kind of sometimes we're getting the issues as they come in as emergencies, right? When it's like, oh, if this person would have just known, or just, a couple steps back, had this information, this power, things could have turned out differently, right? And so I think that's one of the huge parts of Leah as well, and lets us kind of help more people in that manner, because it's not just relying on the point where they're at court and they need an attorney, but rather, say, in the example of the Helene disaster, if someone could know very quickly, what are my rights as a tenant during disaster, and know on the spot, they've got 10 days, what to communicate with their landlord about, their tenancy, then they can easily take that. They don't need an attorney at that point, but that's information that's just not as super readily available. And so the more ways that we can use things like AI to make that readily available and accessible, digestible and readable to folks, I think is an incredible way to empower communities and help us not just at the point where it's an emergency, but allow us to help folks more broadly on the whole continuum of being proactive and preventative in the issues that our communities are facing.
I also want to emphasize that it's incredibly important to have a trusting relationship and going back and forth, getting feedback from you, and then for me on the technology side to be able to implement that. And it creates this, I think, a virtuous cycle of improvement. And one example of that is that we just recently launched together Leo
Mm-hmm.
2.0. And the whole point of the 2.0 platform for Leah is that all the lessons learned from the
Mm-hmm.
experience with the platform we just talked about informed improvements to make and things to add, and even having a conversational voice. Helen, if you don't mind talking
Yeah.
and sharing a little bit about what is Leah 2.0, how is she different now?
Yeah, you kind of already mentioned it, but we constantly connect or collected feedback from Leah 1.0. And from that, Tom helped us create Leah 2.0. And in my opinion, others are welcome to chime in, but you already mentioned it, Tom. I think the biggest change and the most beneficial change to our clients into North Carolina is that it now has the option to speak rather than type. And one thing as a legal services organization, and I mean, organizations across North Carolina, like you have to be accessible. You never know. Like, we want to make sure that anyone, anywhere, anytime can get access to our resources. And let's say someone had a visual impairment or, some other sort of impairment and couldn't access the chatbot. Now they are able to speak to it. So we're hoping that that will make it even easier to use across North Carolina.
She also now has a phone number. So if it was
Mm-hmm.
possible, I know that how many hundreds of thousands of phone calls do you get a year?
300,000, I think, is the latest
Yeah.
number.
Oh
Yes.
my God. To think that this type of technology, when you plug it into different channels, allows you to scale to be able to reach more people and interact with them in a way where the reality that might happen is that they just don't get through to someone and they don't get the help that they need. How does it fit in to the changes at Lance? Because I know that with the labs, which by the way, amazing. Like it's, Lance is not a traditional legal aid organization. It's very progressive and choosing these different technologies and solutions to really make things real, to really close this gap. And so I really applaud you for having the labs because that's kind of like in my mind, it's kind of like a safe space where you can experiment with these things and it'd be okay. And so what are some of the things that you're working on now that will further this mission of closing the access to justice gap?
So one of the things I will say, Tom, just to put a pin in what you just said, is that, the whole point is to bring scalable, sustainable solutions that enhance services to our program and to our state. And the lessons that we're learning through the Innovation Lab and the work that we're doing here, the work that we're doing to make that available to other legal services programs that might not have a lab embedded within its structure, right? So for us, it is all about creating that model of what is going to be scalable, what is going to be sustainable, what will enhance our service delivery, what's going to improve our staff effectiveness, and ultimately what's going to empower our clients in order for them to get the help that they need or the services that they need. And so everything we look at it's with those lens, right? And so some of the other things that we're working on, you kind of hinted at it when you talked about Leah's voice and that phone number and all of that. We are working on an AI voice assistant. And the point of that is not, again, just to throw AI at everything, but one of the reasons we're looking at that is to add capacity to our intake team. Again, with the kinds of numbers that we have, 300,000 calls coming into our helpline, 100,000 making it into the queue, half of that number being abandoned, and then, working its way down to the number of cases that we handle. What we've seen is that only 1 in 3 were getting services, and that's just not good enough for us, right? If we want to ensure that everybody that comes to us gets some level of service, we have to at least address that issue at the gateway. We have to fix that gateway. So one of the things that we're doing is building in capacity using AI to have an intake agent that could be a force multiplier that can take some of those calls all the way through and support the human intake staff. The other thing that we just launched that we're really excited about is our Justice Hub. It's sort of a one-stop shop for client resources and client help. I anecdotally call it my chart for legal because that's how I conceptualize it. But it is sort of this hub, this portal where people can create a profile. So whenever they need services again, their profile's already been created. They don't have to redo that step. They can communicate with a lawyer if they have an open case, or they can apply for help. They can determine whether or not Legal Aid of North Carolina is the right source of help. There's a pre-screen built into it. In addition, as part of our LEA 2.0 upgrade, we've equipped LEA with the ability to do that pre-screen as well. So if somebody starts with LEA, whether inside the hub or on our website, they could still have that experience of being able to determine whether or not they're in the right place. And, the person who uses the hub, that becomes their point of contact with the staff and with the attorneys and with the resources that we have. So no longer do they have to go calling, Googling, looking for help all over the place. They can enter the hub and do everything that they need right there. And that includes connecting with other resources as well.
Mm-hmm. And I love that we've embedded LEA 2.0 just directly in the hub. So it's not, okay, you did your intake questions, but now you got to go back to the website and find something else. Similarly, with all the resources that are on our website, port over. So it really is self-contained in there. And we've pointed people to how they can use both LEA and our other resources that are there, even while they wait to hear back from us about their application, to get that information, have them be informed and really a partner in their legal service and not just kind of a one-way street. And I will add another feature that I really love of LEA 2.0, in addition to the completely voice feature, is the multiple languages that are now available through LEA, because that's as our demographics change, our state changes, I think increased language accessibility is always very important. And additionally, even when you're in the chat function, I love that read aloud button that we now have. And so even if someone types in their question, what LEA returns, as much as we can try to train it to be, in a readable format, accessible as far as literacy, it's a lot to just read and digest. Even as an attorney, you read a summary of the law and you're like, this is a lot sometimes. And so I think even just that ability to click and be able to hear it read to you out loud offers another layer of comprehension and digestion that we didn't have before. And that came from the feedback of LEA 1.0. Another thing that we're working on with you, Tom, that I'm really excited about, and I know our intake team is as well, is using AI to essentially better ask applicants some questions that we're going to need to know to assess whether we can accept their case or not. Because of the limitations we have as far as staff and resources and funding, we unfortunately, as we talked about, can't take every case that comes in, even if folks are eligible, even if, it's broadly an area that we do, such as landlord tenant. And so sometimes we have to ask some detailed questions to be able to see if it's a case that we can accept. And so using AI in those moments, whether it's through the hub or voice intake, text intake, as we develop those and add new features, to be able to read what the person is initially giving us about their legal issue and ask those specific follow-up questions so we can get more specific info to be able to triage their case. And all of it really with the creation of the hub, but also this voice AI intake and text intake, is for folks to be able to just get an answer as soon as possible, right? Usually, especially if you're in a legal issue, having a deadline or something, if we're not the right place for folks, they need an answer as soon as possible. And so the ways in which we can do that through like the pre-screen that Scheree had mentioned, but even as folks submit a full application, to be able to very quickly assess that and let them know. And not just leave it off there, but point them to the right resources that they need. If that's within what we can offer, such as LEA or the other resources on our website, do it yourself forms, things like that, listen and learn clinics, or if it's something, totally outside of legal aid, point them in the right direction. And a lot of this technology allows us to do that.
One thing I want to point out to everyone who's listening is that, some people, I think for good reason, they hear all of this and they think, what am I going to do? Lay off these people that are answering the phones for me, that it's going to replace their jobs? And I mean, I get that that's an initial reaction, but what is actually the benefit of this, I think, correct me if I'm wrong or add to it if you want to, but the idea is that right now you currently have all of these people on the front line answering the phones, talking to people, deciding and reasoning whether or not they would qualify for representation or not. And that, like you mentioned from the numbers, 300,000 phone calls, like too much bandwidth on that. And so what would be a much better use of the time of these professionals? Well, it'd probably be like actually working the cases, right? Actually working the cases, not determining as much about if they qualify or not. But I will point out to everyone that there's still a human in the loop on that qualification part, because
Yeah.
when we work together to put that case assessment, workflow together, the very last point, it provides a recommendation to a human at Lance. It doesn't say you qualify or not, but it leaves that to somebody to decide. But it takes care of the busy work of that engagement. So that's the point. Is this actually, like you said, Scheree, is a force multiplier, lets you accomplish more with the people you have, not about getting rid of them.
And I think too that we have to, it can't be overstated that whatever we're doing with AI has to be done responsibly. And if we're doing it responsibly, that means there are strong guardrails in place and attorney oversight in some instances, depending on the nature of it. Or maybe let me restate that. Maybe not necessarily always attorney oversight, but a human in the loop. Because the AI is really good at handling repetitive tasks and issue spotting and some things, the document drafting and sharing legal information, all of that stuff. It's not good at the making sense part, the contextualizing part. And so a lot of these things you still have to build with the mindset that you're going to have a human there that's doing the making sense part. And so to think that we're just replacing people and embedded in AI and walking away and say, oh, like magic, it's solved, problem solved, check that off my box and move on. That's not what's happening. I mean, everything that we're doing, first, we're starting with what's the problem that we're trying to solve? What's the best fit solution? Is it an AI solution? Okay. How is the AI going to solve this problem? And then what are the guardrails that are going to be put in place? And what's the oversight that's going to happen? Is it meeting our ethical obligations as attorneys? Because we're still a law firm. Are we doing this in a responsible way so that we're not creating additional barriers, or that people aren't going to be harmed by the things that we're doing? So all of that, and then we're testing and we're testing and we're testing and we're gathering feedback from our clients. A lot of times our clients are the ones that are, I think Helen said this, that are driving some of the changes that we're making because they are fully a part of this process. We have a client council. I can't tell you how many meetings Megan has had with our client council members and other members in our community partners, because all of this is really designed with the humans that are centered, and that's our staff and our clients. And then with, like I said, the testing framework that we've put in place to ensure that we're not creating more problems or barriers, but we're really removing them.
And that's one thing that I've really appreciated from working with you all over the years, is the commitment to doing it right and not being afraid to get it out there, to improve it, to get it better and better and better. Because as we found, that's exactly what happens. But you have to start. You have to start for that to happen. I'm just really proud to be working with you all. I am curious, though, with all of these things coming together, what do you think the future holds? Because it seems that the change is happening so quickly, so fast. Every other month, every other week, we hear of something new. Where do you think this is going?
I was doing actually some interviews last week, sorry, and we were interviewing for a litigation director. And one of the things that we were talking about, or we had the candidates talk to us about, was just the legal landscape and how that's changing. The practice of law is evolving and changing right before our eyes. More and more of our court systems are moving to an e-court system. So there's a technology there that both the attorneys and the public has to now figure out how to navigate. We have AI that's making such an impact in our practice, how we work, the kinds of work that it does. It's changing so fast and so rapidly, like you said. And I think for us, we don't yet know where it will go. We're still figuring it out as we go. And AI itself is still very new. And like you said, the models are changing, the systems are changing, and it's evolving so rapidly. I don't know where we'll end up. What I do know is that it is changing, it is evolving, and that we have to be prepared. And we also have to prepare our clients because our clients are out there. They're going to go to the source of help that they have. And if that's ChatGPT at 3 a.m. when they have a crisis going on and our office is closed, that's what they're going to do. You can't necessarily fault them because these are people who are looking for a source of help. I think it's on us to perhaps create a way for them to educate themselves, to understand what that means, and to come to us even after they've done that. And also, we have to ensure that our attorneys and law students coming out of law school are equipped to handle whatever that change is going to be and what this new landscape is going to look like. I think we're long past the time where we can pretend like or field or legal field is not going to be impacted or it's going to remain the same. I think we're long past that. And I think right now it's staying abreast, right? Learning what the best practices are and learning what the new models are and staying abreast. I think that's both incumbent on us as attorneys, but it's also an ethical responsibility, right? We are required to stay abreast, in this state anyway, we're required to stay abreast of technology and technology changes. And so we have to do that and learn as we go and evolve and adapt as we go. So I don't know if I can answer like what's going to happen 10 years from now, 15 years from now, but I can say that whatever is coming, we need to be prepared for it as best as we can.
I agree 100%. We don't know for certain what the future holds, but I think that if we approach things with curiosity, openness, and the confidence to know that as a village, we all together can meet anything that comes our way, that's what we need, as a sense of confidence that we can approach any problem and solve it together. I want to tell everyone out there, you need to check out Legal Aid of North Carolina. I think that they're an exemplar of how legal aid organizations should approach the access to justice gap and solve it. And so with that, how can they keep in touch and learn more about Legal Aid of North Carolina?
Well, if you want to learn more, you can go to our website. So that's legalaidnc.org. You can try out Leah there. She's on every page of the website. And then to get in contact, would that be Megan and Scheree? I'm not sure the answer to that question.
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. We have an innovation lab page on our website as well, where you can check out projects we currently have going on, things we've done in the past, as well as reach out to Scheree and I. We're always happy to brainstorm, chat, share ideas with other legal services organizations or other partners out there. You'll see we're trying to put out more and more kind of toolkits or how did we do this thing that has been done. So there's a toolkit for Leah out there and there's more to come. Tom, to answer your question of what the future looks like, I mean, for me, it's really like it's democratizing the law. It's not gatekeeping everyday access to resolving conflict, which the law is, our court system is at the end of the day. And so, in that spirit, we try to make everything that we do, democratized and shared. So we're always happy to partner with people and talk through ideas or build something together. I mean, a lot of what we increasingly talk about is that these are not state-specific problems. The access to justice problem exists across the nation and international. I've talked to some folks in other countries trying to do similar things. And so the more we can put our heads together is always welcome.
One last thing I will add, Tom, is for us to be able to do all of this, we need resources so and money. So if anybody's listening and they want to help, we are also open to that as well.
Yes, legalaidanc.org/donate.
Yeah. If you're out there and you want to support closing this access to justice gap and helping a lot of really great, deserving people, please donate to Legal Aid of North Carolina. And with that, I just want to thank you, Megan. Thank you, Helen and Scheree, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you all for watching LawDroid Manifesto. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.